I think we got to give it a little count. We got to give it a second because I think it does a little countdown or something.
I think we're good.
Okay. Are we still in the? Which link are you using?
On
YouTube,
the new one I sent you.
The part 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now I see us. Here we are.
And we are live.
I just want to be very careful because I was like, okay, we lost this once.
I know. So we're going to be good boys this time.
Right.
And we were really rocking and rolling. And so we got cut off there for a minute. Going to apologize to Google soon for whatever we did wrong. And now we're just showing some collected images from the movie. God, everything about this design, right? I think they deserve.
I love that.
How many Oscars did they get for this?
I think it was something like 6.
Yeah, because costumes was one of them. I'm going to say they should have just got Best Picture.
You know, that's the funny thing. Like that was pre-Black Panther, I want to say. And before that, I think like the last like genre quote unquote movie that got a best picture was Return of the King.
Wow.
So
and I think Black Panther get Best Picture?
No, it didn't get Best Picture. I think Moonlight got Best Picture that year.
Oh yeah. Of course,
I think it did.
God, it's all such a blur after Corona now.
It is. Time has no meaning.
I know. I still haven't seen Moonlight, man. I got to check that out.
I haven't. I've been in this mindset lately of like I just don't want depressing shit. Like, I just got to be honest. Like, I know I should be like more conscious and like and like try to care about these things, but I have been slowly devolving. Like over the last several years, and like the days of me just sitting through like 2 hours of torture porn is just not my thing. And I don't even think that that's what Moonlight is. It's just that like, there's a lot of movies that just want to tug at your heartstrings and make you feel bad about stuff. I'm like, that's not what I go to the movies for. And actually, I'm going to bring that up later because we're talking about this right now.
No, totally. I mean, that's totally fair, and that's one of the reasons I haven't seen it yet. At the time, I was like, God, I just don't want to watch something about, I don't know, like the super serious stuff. Yeah. But at this point, I feel like I just owe it a watch because it looked like it deserved what it got.
It was 10 Academy Award nominations, 10 total. It was including Best Picture and Director. And it won the most 6. It won 6: Best Costume Design, Best Production, Best Makeup, Best Hairstyling, Film Editing, Best Sound, and Best Mixing, which it deserves. All of those things.
At that point, how do you not get Best Picture?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that's how you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, at what point are you just beyond like genre?
Right.
And this is just such a good film. And I don't know who redesigned IMDb, but I could wring their neck at this point. Like, I'm just trying to pull a couple of profiles up to talk. And it's like everybody but what I want. But shout out to Hugh Keys Brian. Hope I'm saying his name right. We lost him the tail end of last year.
We did.
And we were talking about the making of the movie, and one thing that stood out for me from the making of the movie, and this is available in the behind the scenes, is that he would walk around on set in the middle of the desert as a Morton Joe. Mm-hmm. Not easy for someone in his late 60s, by the way. Really want to keep that in mind. Like I hate to say this, he was just an old man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But he would go around on set with everybody and start cheering on his war boys, really getting into the character. It helped them get into character. And I just thought that was such a wonderful little story about that man and his dedication to the role, and what a friendship he must have had with George Miller, who directed the film. Mm-hmm. So a huge shout out to that amazing man who made that character come to life.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, actually. Yeah. But I guess we're just starting over. So let's just start over.
Yeah, just start over. Well, I don't know. I'm probably going to edit these together somehow with some friends' help later. But we covered, what did we cover? We covered the intro. Yeah. We covered
the initial buzz going into the film.
Yeah, the initial buzz, the history of the film itself. And Morton Joe, the actor himself, not so much the character. And I guess we talked about the world building that this film does. And if you look at these vehicles, I mean, this is what we're talking about. Like,
Hmm.
when was the last time you saw a movie who gave that wasn't a Fast and Furious film, okay,
Hmm.
where the cars played such an important role and
Right.
really said everything you needed to know about a character?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
100%. Like, yeah.
yeah, and I mean, sorry, that image is so small, but this right here, I mean, look at that, and
Hmm.
not just the cars, but every person featured on screen is unique as well.
Hmm.
Every character is unique. Um, But I guess we should segue into like the other most important character, and I guess the controversy of that character, like
Hmm.
Furiosa.
Yeah.
And one of the things that
Furiosa.
fascinated me about this movie, yeah, I know, right? Um, like how people complained that she was so prominent in the film,
Right.
even though because we discussed the beginning of the film, it shows us that this world isn't getting better.
No.
You know what I mean? Mad Max has basically failed
Hmm.
and she's just trying to do the same thing he is. She's trying to create or find paradise in this wasteland.
Hmm.
But I don't. Where did that come from? Like, what are your opinions on
That's
that? Like,
like that is like I kind of alluded to this when we first started recording. Like, there were people even in our own Action to Go Go family, like writers on our website, who were kind of irritated with her presence or her prominence, I should say, in the movie. And I just kind of think like it's you kind of at that point now where we're already at that point now where confirmation bias is everything.
mm-hmm,
Like, you know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
Where no matter what you say or do, and I say this for both sides of this argument too. Like, I think we in general have always been very middle of the road with this. It's just like, guys, can't we all just get along with this? Like,
yeah,
it's just, but I think that with this particular situation, it's like the people that were making that argument just were looking for an excuse to make that argument. You know what I mean? And here's my thing about Mad Max. I kind of said this in the previous what we were doing earlier. Um, like he's not he's not a classic hero. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not like one of those. He's not even the Punisher. Like, you know what I mean? He's more like a
yeah,
journeyman. Like, he kind of stumbles into these scenarios and then he walks away. And what you do with and every scenario is like a different situation for him, even though it's all in this like post-apocalyptic reality. And
yeah,
so I saw people complaining that like, oh, he doesn't talk much. Truthfully, by the time we got to Beyond Thunderdome, Mel Gibson wasn't talking that much either. Like, like he was just kind of like, he's kind of like this broken character in Fury Road, and we're kind of getting to that point over the course of 3 movies. You know what I mean? Like, he's more expressive in the first film versus the third film, which is Beyond Thunderdome. And by the time we get to Fury Road, he's broken.
I think that's a great point. Like with Mad Max Thunderdome, you really do see that it's not about him.
Hmm.
At that point, it's about the world he's in. And
Yes.
he's like walking around this world and it like because when he's with these children, right?
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah.
the whole crux of it.
Yeah.
Beyond Thunderdome, he meets this pack of children who somehow survived the apocalypse in this state.
Hmm.
Which I think the timing's a bit dubious for them to remain children,
Oh,
but we'll just
yeah. Yeah.
ignore that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
That
but he
totally
finds
is.
this, yeah, he finds this magical pocket of children
Hmm.
that are so pathetic
Yeah.
when you realize, and he treats them that way to a point. Like he's like, hey
Hmm.
guys, it's time to grow up. And in that
Yeah.
way, I think it's a great metaphor for life. Just looking beyond the pure story of it. But
Hmm.
but again, it's that world building. And I went back to that movie after thinking for so long, like it was the weakest one for some reason.
Hmm.
But then I
It's
look at it
actually,
like, wow, it's actually fascinating how,
it
like,
is.
when those kids are telling their story,
Hmm.
like you're looking at the prototype for storytelling. Like
Yes.
it's this prototype these children are building. These children
Hmm.
are making their world.
Yes.
And it's so sad because
Hmm.
it's so separated from reality.
Yeah.
But what were we going
Well,
to say?
no, I was just going to point this out. Like, first of all, there's very much a Lost Boys aspect to
Mm,
those kids in Beyond Thunderdome, which I actually kind of really
yep.
appreciate. And then you kind of see it somewhat echoed in actual Hook, the Steven Spielberg
Hmm.
movie. Like, there's
Yeah.
something about the aesthetic that just seems all familiar. And I almost wonder if I really did a deep dive, if some of the costume and set designs were, there was a mishmash of people that maybe cross pollinated on those 2 films, or like a cross section of people on those 2 films. But the other thing I just want
That's
to
a
point
great
out,
point.
so I hadn't seen Beyond Thunderdome in years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just so happened that I saw it right around the time of Logan. And I think it was like the same year I watched it. And those movies are very similar beat for beat. Was that a burp? It's too late down there.
I thought I muted myself. I'm sorry.
You know, this is live. This is live.
I'm gonna take it out in post. Don't worry. I'm gonna take this out in post.
This is live. This is the beauty of
Jesus,
things being
man.
live.
Oh my God. My finger slipped on the mute button, and here we go, folks. You're getting the real.
This is uncut.
Whoever's
Uncut,
out there.
Uncut.
Action a go uncut.
There you go.
Oh my God. Sorry. But, finish your point.
I just noticed that Logan, the finale especially is very much Mad Max Fury Road. I'm sorry, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. And I can get into the weeds about that. I won't get too much into it, but it was something that I noticed when I was watching the movie a few years back. I was like, wait a minute, Logan kind of lifted the finale of Beyond Thunderdome and put it in this movie. So I just thought that was interesting.
Interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. You mean the Hugh Jackman Wolverine Logan movie?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I gotta watch these back to back then.
Yeah, and there's
you know what? That would not surprise me at all. It only came out a couple of years afterwards, and you know how they love lifting from each other.
Right. Not Fury Road though. I'm talking about Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but yeah. No, totally fair.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the whole kid aspect of it too.
Right. Yeah. 100%. And that's really when I noticed it. It was the way that the kids are introduced. I was like, oh, okay, I see what happened here.
Yeah.
But anyway. Mm-hmm.
And Thunderdome is still such a unique movie. But it was really interesting, and this is going to be completely off topic, it's not going to be off topic, but it's going to be a little tangent. Did you ever watch the Rick and Morty episode where they basically go to Mad Max Fury Road World?
I think I have seen that one.
It's so fascinating how they latched onto it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite parts was one of the characters. It's a joke, but he's like, my body is chrome, my blood is gasoline. But I really think it speaks to how this movie was so memeable.
Yeah.
And I think Mad Max Thunderdome, Beyond Thunderdome may have been, it had that same je ne sais quoi, that still shows up in pop culture. We don't need another hero.
Just the concept of Thunderdome. Public Enemy made a song called "Welcome to the Terror Dome."
There you go.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I actually just watched the Tina Turner documentary. Dude, my girl was interested in watching it. And I was like, I know Tina Turner. I saw what Love got to do with it Beyond Thunderdome. I'll dive into this. And it was, first of all, it was very fascinating. She's a very fascinating person. But yeah, it kind of, I saw Beyond Thunderdome kind of come back in a small way back into the conversation because of that documentary that came out a few months ago.
Oh wow, I got to give that a watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's a great point. You just said that because I sort of had the same experience. I feel like I know who Tina Turner is because of that movie about her, which was amazing. Angela Bassett,
she's just phenomenal.
Lawrence Fishburne in one of his career-defining performances.
Yeah.
A very brave performance for him to do.
Yeah, right.
In my opinion,
because there are black women who still don't like Lawrence Fishburne because of that movie.
I mean, but that was also memeable too. Speaking of how these things echo through culture.
Right.
Yeah, but the other thing I saw was Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, where she is, the head be in charge. You know what I mean? And just such a powerful, commanding performance.
Oh yeah. And that's actually the one thing you realize watching that documentary is that's an extension of her personality, just up and down. That's all it is.
It wouldn't be so wonderful, you just show up on set and the director's just like, you be you.
Yep.
Yeah. Gosh, it's such a strange collection of movies, but so archetypal to the point. And again, and I'll put Rick and Morty to bed, but the way they were able to just encapsulate the beats and spit it back out, I think it really says something about how good George Miller is with the structure of his post-apocalypse. And even the movie ends with one of these quotes in, again, Mad Max Fury Road specifically, and I think Thunderdome did as well.
Yeah, it did.
He starts developing this mythology
Mhm.
and this again, this proto language
Yeah.
where it's this fascinating space where you see people reinventing the world out of the rubble of what came before.
Right.
And
Mhm.
he has such a unique spin on it,
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of how things break down and get put back together.
Yeah. No, no, and I think that that's I think you nailed it on the head, right? So one of the things I did kind of with going into preparation. So my whole thing with a movie I really want to watch is that I don't read about it. I don't watch anything maybe except for that trailer and that's it. Like, you know what I mean? If I
Mhm.
really
Yeah,
want to watch it, I'm
yeah,
not doing the behind the scenes stuff. I'm not diving into the article interviews afterwards or any of that. So I didn't. So once I saw the trailer for Fury Road, I was like, I'm fully invested. I don't want to know anything about this movie until I see it.
yeah.
And so it happened. And of course, I became obsessed like afterwards. But my obsession kind of extended to the licensed content, particularly the DC comics that came out in the around the time of the film, which kind of expanded the universe even more. But I never did a deep dive into the behind the scenes until the Blu-ray came out, and I didn't do an even deeper dive until like this past week, where I got like more of an expansive view of like how we got here, right? So I say all that to say, um, you bring up the mythological perspective of Mad Max, right? That George Miller has, right? And we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about this in the last stream, right? Or the stream that that didn't happen. um, but like we talked about this, which is that these movies aren't meant to really be like a they're not, they weren't designed as a timeline. You know what I mean? Like he wasn't
Yeah.
saying this happens first, second, third, fourth. Like he kind of was just making it up as he went along and then expanding on it as he went along, right? And so I think the problem here, going back to your thing about like people's irritation or annoyance with the Furiosa's prominence in the story and
Oh God, yeah.
Mad Max lesser, quote unquote, I don't believe this, but quote unquote lesser role in this story, is that George Miller has always been taking an approach with Max himself, which is that he is a mythological figure in the wasteland. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's never meant to actually be like, Spider-Man or Superman. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's not like, we're not getting, what he is like this character that moves through this space and people are kind of, what we're seeing is almost like people reinterpreting his story to us in a way. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and to the point to the point that like I found out that George Miller actually did not actually read Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces between 1 and 2, and that
Oh wow.
literally that shifted the whole his whole take on Mad Max going into Mad Max 2.
Wow. That's out.
So
That's
yes.
amazing.
So yeah,
Jesus.
so this kind of like this weird fanboy thing about like this is the thing I really get annoyed with. It's like yeah, the fanboy thing of like fanboy fangirl, whatever you want to call it, thing of like, and I'm guilty of this too, of obsessing over the details of the story and not the details of the filmmakers or the
Hmm.
creators. Um, yeah, I just throw all that out. Like it's just like ultimately it's what the creator wants it to be, and this has been an evolving story. It's not something that he's been trying to trying to like an opus that he's been trying to make since day one. Like he just has kind of been constantly going back to it when it felt appropriate to him and building on it. You know. So
Yeah.
that was the thing I just wanted to toss out there.
No, and I think that makes perfect sense. I mean, and
Mhm.
it's so interesting, how he's able. And again, going back to the nature of how he made this, like there wasn't a script.
Mhm. Right.
It was all visual bits of material that they were just slapping on a wall.
Mhm.
And then you watch the movie and you feel that. Like what the characters say, like they don't say a lot, but what they do say is important.
Mhm. Yes.
And it's just such a masterclass in that in that sense
Mhm.
of movie making. Like this
Yeah.
is a movie.
It
I know
is.
you're mentioning the comics and whatnot, but
Mhm.
I mean, even comics, I think there was actually a lot of like thought bubbles explaining what's going on,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
In
Mhm.
the like
And
even with the
captions and whatnot. Yeah.
yeah, even with comics, you need to explain a little bit more to fill in those panels at
Yeah.
times,
Mhm.
But here it's just go, go, go,
Go go go. Yeah.
and then maybe the stunts we could go on about. I'm not sure how much more time you have, by the way.
I mean, we're starting up. Like, it's Memorial Day. Like, I'm chilling. Like, whatever.
Okay, cool.
Let's just go for it.
We're vibing. We're rolling. Let's go.
We're rolling.
Yeah, but the stunts,
Yeah.
going back to the first movie, made in the 70s. I mean, lots of movies had crazy stunts, but I think it speaks a lot that even Mad Max and Road Warrior are still legendary for the stunt work. Oh, yeah. And this movie continues that legacy.
Oh, for sure.
Like, there's definitely CGI, but I will say that even the CGI I saw, I didn't really mind. Right. Like, I understood, or it added to the emphasis of the film.
Yeah, it accentuates, and I think that's I love the Fast and the Furious movies, but like at the same time, like I definitely have seen some people like, well, everybody goes see these Fast and Furious movies, and this movie didn't get the credit it deserved, and I mean I understand that on some level, but I think that the with the Fast and the Furious movies, when it comes to effects, like they clearly the Fast and Furious movies go out of their way to deny the laws of physics. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, constantly deny the law of physics. Like, there's a new trailer out right now for this movie, and like it's the number of things that cars should not be able to do is like ridiculous, right?
I know.
By comparison,
go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say by comparison, Mad Max Fury Road actually, and like they said this themselves, goes out of its way to not break the law of physics. And one of the ways they got around that was not doing CG and like in abundance, and like the CG in this movie accentuates scenes. Like it's boils down to yes, the pole, the dudes on the pole that are like grabbing people out of the cars and stuff like that. That's done all real. And there's a scene where Max has a fight with this guy on the pole, but when Max comes back up, there's a big rig explosion. Like the explosion's real, but there are additional explosions in that explosion that are not, and that's what I mean by like it accentuates, but it's not leaning on these horribly. And I think that makes a big difference in the suspense. You know what I mean? Like the level of suspense. And the other part of this too is just like, look, like I've been waiting to say this for a long time, and I've been thinking about this a lot. Working with Action to Go, working with the Urban Action Expo and Showcase. The thing about movies for me, the reason I prefer the genre stuff instead of like the dramatic, like, Oscar bait stuff, right? Is because look what humans can do. You know what I mean? Like, look what stunt people can do. Look what engineers can do. Like, look what like stunt drivers can do. Like, you know what I mean? Like that is really what you're getting out of these movies. Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like these movies kind of lose something when they do lean too hard on the visual effects because it's not as interesting. But it also just doesn't have that visceral, like, holy crap, like someone could have died making this. Like, that's the thrill I get out watching Jackie Chan. It's like he could have died making this, and there's no question about that, And there's something just kind of amazing about that to me. And I think this movie is an extension of that logic.
Yeah, I agree again 100%. And I think this was the year. I remember this when people were really, I think, more seriously than ever talking about a category of the Oscars for stunt people.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yeah,
like there was a lot of heat around that, and I think this was a big part of it because you couldn't get away with this movie without stunts. You couldn't do this movie without stunts,
right? And
stunt people and expert stunt people. We're not talking about just anybody. Right. Like, I mean, just this image right here that we're looking at now. I mean, these dudes are flying 30 feet above moving cars. Like, it's terrifying. Right. And I think they actually found him. I don't know if these guys do that professionally or something.
No, they do. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh my God.
Like they're like Cirque du Soleil type dudes or something like that.
There you go. Yeah. Just experts who do that sort of thing. Just amazing, man. Amazing.
And also, like, I think I look at I'm thinking about just in terms of stunts, like you kind of look at the people that are attached to this, like there's stunt drivers in here who are like, old men. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't like a new generation of stunt drivers doing this stuff. Like, these are people that, like, some of these guys like actually worked in the previous Mad Max movies, and there's just they have they have history behind their work. You know what I mean? And I think that's also pretty impressive. Like they're doing young men things, and they're not young men.
Well, but also, I mean, they're skilled. They're
Yeah,
just skilled
the
practitioners at
season.
what they
Yeah.
do.
Hmm.
Exactly. Like the infamous. Well, I don't know if it's infamous, but one of the glory shots in the movie
Hmm.
was the truck, the war rig,
Hmm.
getting destroyed, and they've really, I mean, they really destroyed the truck. They
Yeah.
really flipped it, and not completely. Like again, they use CGI to make it bigger, but there was really a dude driving the thing,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
they had a whole segment dedicated to that one scene,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he got out and he was fine, and that's what
Yep.
stunt people do, you know, he just did his job. But you're sitting here like they're talking about crashing a car, and we
Hmm.
take it for granted so much, but it's like, no, these guys are skilled.
These
These
guys are
guys
skilled.
know
Yeah.
what they're doing, and they, as much as it's wonderful to see like younger stunt people who are learning and trying to make a name for themselves, you
Hmm.
forget that there's people 30, 40 years in the business who can just nail it right now.
Right now.
And
Right.
we don't talk about them enough. It's such a shame.
Hmm.
And they're so talented.
No,
Like
they are. They are. And like, yeah, it's kind of weird, like that Hollywood doesn't want to give them that extra, like even if it's the untelevised portion of the Oscars, because I think they still do that where they kind of do it for like the more technical stuff is like untelevised. But yeah,
they do. They
these
do.
guys deserve like a nod, like in general.
100%. And that really tripped me out when I found out about that whole like the Oscars before the Oscars. I think Jackie Chan got one of those Oscars or
Yeah,
something.
he did. Yeah.
Um, like he didn't get, it wasn't part of the official ceremony, but he got one um a while ago, which was really cool to see considering all he's done. But
Hmm.
but yeah, but just to go back to, I guess, to shift gears a little bit. We talked about the stunts. We talked
Hmm.
about everything, the women in the movie, right?
Hmm.
Because the
Hmm.
whole story, a part of the story is Furiosa robs these women from Immortan Joe. One of them's
Hmm.
pregnant, and they're his
Hmm.
like, I mean, there's no way to walk around it. They're his prize breeders,
Right.
essentially.
Yeah.
What do you think about that aspect of it? Because that was sort of, because in Mad Max, his family was destroyed, right?
Hmm.
Turns him into
Hmm.
Mad Max. Road Warriors about finding paradise. Thunderdome, same thing, finding paradise, but it's these children. And this time
Hmm.
we're focusing on women. What do you think about that aspect of it? And do you think it adds to it? Do you think it's, I don't know.
Well, I think
I just want to explore it. No
I
wrong
think it,
answer.
no, I think it humanizes it. Like, I think it 100%
Hmm.
humanizes the story. Like, I think the misconception, with Mad Max is that it is a kind of like this, this ballistic like action film, like, action franchise, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
But and like, I mean, like, yes, it is on a certain level, but there's always sort of like an artistic, like just like a deft artistic hand at the helm of all these things. And I'm not just talking about George Miller, I'm talking about the team of people that help make these movies
Yes.
possible.
Yes.
And so I think that the problem I get a lot of times when I see people talking about these films, particularly Fury Road, is they're not really thinking about the art. They're really, I feel like they are so laser focused on the badassery. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that George Miller like, and I think what George Miller really brings to this, besides all the technical prowess, right, is like his ability to kind of go, to find the humane aspects of it and make them stick, you know?
Yeah.
And that goes not just to the brides of the Morton Joe, like that goes all the way to Nux and his storyline. You know what I mean? And like just how I still get moved by his final words in the movie. You know what I mean?
I
And
know.
like there's something about the way the camera moves and the way he says it and the music. It's perfect. Like, and it's art. You know what I mean? It's not just a action sequence finale. It is art.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what I think that's what Miller invites here. That like I think I see not everybody, but too many people gloss over, is the artistic approach to it. Like I think that with the Brides of Immortan Joe, they are like, I mean, I'm imagining, I'm seeing images of the movie in my head now, and it's like the
Mm.
moment where like we go through like about what I want to say maybe 40 minutes of movie before we actually see them. You know what I mean? We know that something was stolen, and we know that Morton Joe has caught on to that now. He's after Furiosa. But just like the juxtaposition when Max wakes up after the sandstorm, and then he turns the corner of the war rig and he sees like the brides. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they're like
Yeah.
angels in a wasteland. You
They
know?
really are. And then, of course, compounded with the water
You're right.
everywhere. Like it's
Yeah,
it's literally a slice of paradise that
it
he's
is.
walking in on.
Yeah.
And gosh, it's so
And
good,
like, and it's great too
so
because
good.
like you know that he is also like, is this a mirage? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that I think you need those things. I think those things are important to the story. I think that like, if George Miller didn't do those things, like, then it would just kind of be like this empty action film. But he takes a moment in the middle of all this, like, this high velocity, intense like action to give you something that you can care about. And also, I mentioned this on an article in Action to Go Go. There's a very real motivation here because of them. Like these women don't want to get raped. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I
yeah,
mean, that's
yeah,
like
100%.
out
Yeah,
of all the things that you could have put together to like kind of work in some like contrived plot to motivate these characters, for them not to want to get raped is, you instantly understand it, you instantly get it, and you're instantly like, okay, no, they got to get away from this dude. Like, you
yeah.
know what I mean?
No, no,
And
totally,
so again,
totally.
so it just, again, like, even though it's artistic, it leans into the visceral nature of all this. You know what I mean? Like it still very much serves that tone of the movie, which is like, yes, this is about survival, life or death, point
Yeah,
blank.
and in a way, it's I don't know. Maybe I'm just sort of realizing this. In a way, it takes it back to the first one because that was a part of the first one. Like
Mm-hmm.
Mad Max, he loses his son, right, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
wife to
Yeah.
the bad guys, and in this instance, he's sort of doing it, but it's for a virtuous reason.
Yeah.
Like these women don't want to get raped, and this
Mm-hmm.
woman doesn't want her child growing up in this world where
Mm-hmm.
he's going to be turned into some warrior, like who's just like literally a dispensable thing, right?
Right.
Just used
Mm-hmm.
um to fight and whatnot. Sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo, so it's sort of tripping me up. But
I
when
don't
that
hear anything.
when Okay, good, good, good. When that happens, or when one of these characters dies and she's pregnant, I think everybody watching this is going to have already seen the movie, so spoilers
Yeah.
continuous
Mm-hmm.
from now on. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just struck me because all of a sudden it made it so personal,
Yes.
because you see Immortan Joe, like his one of his children just died. And it's
Yes.
this weird trick it plays on you where you sort of feel innately sorry for him all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden. And
Yeah.
the other character here, forget his name. Oh, hold on. The big guy. Um
Oh, Rictus.
Rictus. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. I wanted to actually use his name too. Nathan Jones, who plays
Mm-hmm.
Rictus Erectus. Oh
Oh,
my
is that?
god.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, it's right there, right? I mean, it's even in his name. Like these guys are rapists. They're horrible people. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, but they just lost one of their own,
You're right.
and they're sad about it, and
Hmm.
beautiful baby brother,
You're right. Yeah. 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 But
but
also, I
just
love that too. Like, I love how complicated it gets, even though it's like a simple plot. You know what I mean? Like, it's the movie's doing a lot of things emotionally to you, like you said, where like a Morton Joe's upset that his offspring is dead, and like because it's a baby, you're like, and an innocent woman in the process, you're kind of like, oh damn, okay, that is kind of awful, you know. But at the same time, you're like, yeah, like Morton Joe's still a bad guy, so it definitely plays this trick with you where it kind of like messes with you and it manipulates you just a little bit.
yeah, and it's just genius because it does draw you in. But real quick, this is
Mhm.
I hate to do this to you, but just a real quick slide.
Yeah.
Or look at have you ever looked at all the names of these characters?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Look at
yeah.
this, like Josh
Are you
Hellman,
sharing?
Slit.
Oh, no, I can't
Um,
see if you're. Are you
oh
sharing
no,
this?
I'm
Or?
not. I'm not sharing just yet. Let me pull
Okay.
this over.
Hmm.
See if it'll let me. Hold on, let me bounce out of here. We'll just go to IMDb. I think this is legal. But Josh Hellman is Slit. Nathan Jones, Rictus Erectus. Zoe Kravitz, Toast the Knowing. I never even knew she had a name.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A
Hmm.
Splendid Angarod. This is
Hmm.
Cheeto the Fragile. Oh my God. John Howard, the people eater, the bullet farmer.
Yeah,
This is the world building thing
it
aspect of it.
is. It
It's
is.
not there, but you can sort of see the characters when
Yeah.
just by hearing the names.
Well, I think that, and I think that's the great thing about this. Like, again, going back to this art thing, like it's they're giving you. There's so much. I posted this on my Instagram. There's so much story in every frame. You know, and like it just
100%.
it drills down to like the set design, the costume design, the way the characters talk. You know what I mean? Like their names. What they're wearing, like the cars that they drive, the resources. Like it's just there's so many layers to it, and you wouldn't have gotten these many layers if this film hadn't been in development for like something crazy like 20 years. You know what I mean?
No,
Um,
100%. I mean
yeah,
but also like you were just saying the bullet farm,
yeah,
the what do they call it, gas town. I
Gastown.
mean, it's this weird mix of childish
Hmm.
simplicity,
Yeah,
but very serious like connotations to that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and Joe and Morton Joe, like he's the guy who controls the water.
yeah. He is
Like he's
100%.
not just some warlord, some warlord. Like he
Hmm.
controls this resource,
Yeah.
and it
Hmm.
makes it so abundantly clear from the outset when he releases the water, and all
Hmm.
of these, I guess, lack of a better term, like homeless people or the
Hmm.
rabble of his little part of the world just show up to get it.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just the structure of it. It's he just builds this incredible world.
I also like how Joe actually throws out a little philosophy at the rabble, where he's
Oh
like,
yeah,
don't get too used to the water because eventually you'll start to resent it, which actually serves him. You know what I mean? Like, because of course these people need water. They live in a desert. Like, you know what I mean? But
of
I
course.
just thought that was really interesting, like the level of manipulation that Joe has are on people. I also thought it was really cool, like back to the weird world building and like how every frame tells a story. Um, and this is something they expound on in the comic book, but you don't know this when you're first watching the film if you haven't read the comics. Um, yeah, Joe is former military. And so when they put that bodysuit on him, you see that he's decorated. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And so that kind of answers some questions right there about how he was able to get the resources. Like, you know what I mean? How he was able to like, get to this position, like a guy with military prowess, who's able to like, probably like through action and violence was able to occupy a space that actually had a water resource.
yeah, yeah. Well, again, just to just to focus in on a Morton Joe. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I'm not in approval of what he actually did.
Right, of course,
But
yeah.
before
But
I
the
go
story's
down
a
this little
story.
rabbit hole, yeah, but the
Mhm.
story's a story. And if you look at it from a certain angle, and this is sort of something you can do with The Walking Dead as well, at
Mhm.
any point in time. Like if you look at it from a certain way, he's doing the best he can,
Mhm.
right, with what he has, and they have
Mhm.
nothing.
Yeah,
So,
right, right.
and again, going back to what he said about the water, like that is such a hard thing to say. Like,
Mhm.
don't get used to this because then you're a slave to it, blah, blah, blah. But he's sort of right. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And then you look at the world he was building, like there was fauna, there was green stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously he was doing some sort of management around
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
And he's not, I don't know, and like he's just a couple things away from maybe not being a bad guy.
Mhm.
Or in some ways, maybe right, which is sort of scary at
Right,
times.
which is the real terrifying thing about it. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
he's hoarding resources. Like, I mean, that's what he's doing from the women to the water to like his brothers who we don't know if they're birth brothers, but like his brothers who have a town for
Yeah.
gas. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like he's hoarding
mhm,
resources, and in this environment, he becomes a god. You know?
exactly. And also, and this becomes apparent in the film, where else are they going to go?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Furiosa's plan was like, okay, this isn't here. Let's just keep going.
Mhm.
And Mad Max points this out. Well, number one, we don't know what's out there. Number two, we're probably going to die anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's just go back.
Mhm.
So it's just it's weird how the movie does that huge MacGuffin on you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but it also there's nowhere else to go.
Mhm.
It's just it is what it is.
I also want to point out that like it's and it's never said explicitly as far as I remember, but like Morton Joe's looking to make an offspring, more than likely a worthy successor. And if you look at his
Mhm.
sons, you look at his sons that are surrounded by him. You have Rictus, who's clearly not too bright, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
kind of like just like a bull in a china shop, right?
The incredible Nathan Jones, by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah, right. Who's also in some sort of breathing apparatus on top of that. So there's clearly some sort of flaw.
Here he is. Well, here he is. You
Yeah,
mentioned that, and
yeah,
here he is.
yeah.
And it's really, it's. Does he need it? Maybe
Hmm.
he does. I don't know. That's the crazy thing. Like obviously, Morton Joe does. I think.
Hmm. Right,
Like,
yeah.
there's no getting around that. But I don't know. It's just
Hmm.
so interesting.
But then on top of that, like the little the I was about to say something politically incorrect, but the little dude in like the little with the telescopic lens, who's like kind of like the watch out, like
Yeah, yeah. Well,
that's
he's got
also his
some.
son.
No, exactly. That's also a son. And you're right. He's got some deformities. I
Yeah,
think you could say. You know what I
right,
mean?
right,
And
right, right.
obviously, he's still functioning, whatnot. But it's weird their interaction, and that
Yeah,
goes back to it's
yeah.
almost a callback to Thunderdome. Remember
Hmm.
who
Hmm.
runs Bartertown?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
run, and Master Blaster.
Hmm.
I'm Master. He's Blaster, and it
Yeah.
sort of echoes that as well.
Hmm.
But you're right. Like Morton Joe is looking for this perfect kid,
Hmm.
right? That can take his place, that he can raise. Rictus is sort of close, but doesn't have the brains. The one who has the brains obviously doesn't have the body.
Right.
And yeah, so he's really in a bind here when these women.
And you also
Um,
get a glimpse. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, no, I was just gonna say, but you also get a glimpse that Morton Joe's body is diseased. I mean, you clearly
Oh yeah, no,
he's connected to a breathing apparatus on top of everything else, right? But you also
yeah,
get a glimpse of the boils on his body,
yeah, yeah.
like you know what I
He's
mean?
at he's at end of life.
Yes,
I mean, it's not. He's not saying it, but that's also probably why he's such a vicious tyrant.
right.
You know, like he doesn't have time. And
Hmm.
even Nux, Nux is a tragic character because he doesn't have time.
Right.
I mean, maybe he broke himself off something back there when he was in
Hmm.
private time, but he was like aching for a kiss, you know what I mean? And that
Yeah.
was the best he could get.
Yeah.
Um, but he had covered in tumors and everything
Hmm.
else,
Hmm.
such a sad character. God.
Yeah. 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 No, absolutely. And like, yeah, it all serves the story. Which is like
Yeah.
the amazing thing. I mean, how many movies do we watch where things don't even serve the story? Like they're just like things to like, wink and nod to like the internet. Like you know what I mean? Like has nothing to do with the movie at all. It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, let's throw this thing about this meme in here, or like let's be responsive to what the fans have said about this thing one time, like on Twitter, like 2 years ago while we were making this movie. Like none of that is here. It's just about the world and the story
Yeah.
and what they're saying, and that's it.
No, that is an amazing point, actually. And that's something like we had a quick conversation. Maybe we should do The Last Jedi next.
Mm,
Yeah, that's the second one, right? The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, whatever. But there was something they did at
yeah,
the beginning of
yeah.
the movie where they basically made it out to be like when Poe was trolling the First Order with a phone call, right?
Oh yeah. Mhm.
And I was like, this is okay, this is funny, but this isn't Star Wars.
No,
You know
no, it
what I
isn't.
mean?
No.
And
Mhm.
that was one, and I think that's right off of your point where you don't get any of that in this movie.
No.
Society's broken down. They love engines because engines go, and
Yes.
that's it. They love gasoline because gasoline moves. They
Hmm.
love bullets because bullets kill. And
Yep.
there's no irony in this here. It's you
Hmm.
get what you get, and like, oh wow, that's an amazing point actually. How
Yeah.
dedicated it is to its own story and world.
Yes. Hmm. And I mean, these are things that even I struggle with. Like, look, I've had to do stuff before, and like, I look at stuff like this as inspiration. Where like, when I'm telling a story, where I'm like, well, am I making this about me or about my irritation with the something that's happening in the world or the internet, or am I just telling the story? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
really does. It really is about dedication to the story. Like that's it. Then that's so impressive because like it's so easy to be responsive to the internet. And I think that's what people get mad about when we see like, any number of things like in modern entertainment, right? That's like just too responsive to the internet. It's like, no, this is his story. He's going to tell his story like hell or high water. And that's something that I wish more modern directors would go back to or even discover for the first time. Because I don't think nearly enough of them do. Or maybe it's also the studios who are like, oh, you got to mention this because, you know, Wookie abuser 399 said said this on Reddit, and like it got like 2,000 likes, Like, you know,
I want to meet Wookiee Abuser 309. Jesus. Terrible human being.
so my bad. But yeah, actually, you know what's
No,
actually
it's all
funny
good.
too? You know what actually was funny too? Just as an aside, by accident, I did not mean to do this at all. This is kind of, I feel like this is kind of how my life works. It's like things kind of happy accidents happen to me back to back, in relation to each other. My fiance Liz, she just randomly put on Happy Feet. Like I didn't tell her to put on Happy Feet. She just put it on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I had never seen it before because I don't really watch animated movies like that. It's nothing against them. I just never really watch them like that. I don't have kids, so it's like, you know. And I'm sitting there watching it, and the credits are rolling, and it says directed by George Miller, and I'm like, holy
Yeah.
god damn it! I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
this is
he
the same
also
guy who directed Happy Feet and Babe.
exactly. That's what I was about to say. Like, so going to, but again, but real quick, just to go back to the filmography, which we sort of did before. He had Violence in the Cinema Part 1 in 1971. It was a short. The Devil and Evening Dress documentary short. St. Vincent's Revenue film, another short. Then he went right to Mad Max. Mad Max occupied his time until the mid 80s. He did a Tina Turner movie, which makes sense. Then he did Lorenzo's Oil. He did The Witches of Eastwick.
Oh, was that
Oh
him? I
my
didn't know that he was the
gosh.
director. Now I got to go back and watch that.
I love that movie. Me and my mom both love that movie.
I didn't know he did
Oh
Witches of
my
Eastwick.
God.
That's
That
funny.
is
Interesting.
anybody listening, watch Witches of Eastwick. That's one of those rare movies where I want to see it remade.
Yeah.
I would love to see that movie remade. Yeah, but then he did Babe, Pig in the City. Wow. What's the Renzo's? Oh, I never saw that. Happy Feet 2, and then Mad Max Fury Road.
Right.
Jesus,
Right.
man. What a filmography.
Yeah.
That's a filmmaker right
That's
there.
a filmmaker.
But it's important to keep in mind. I want to throw out two things. Number one, he was actually involved in a Justice League film that
Yes.
never got made. And
Yeah.
that occupied a lot of his time.
Yeah.
And he got very close to making that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very close.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Guillermo del Toro was involved in it as well. But the woman who is, when we first see her, she's naked and she runs out to greet everybody because she was bait.
Right.
Of
Yeah.
course. But she was actually supposed to be Wonder Woman in that movie. And
Yeah.
it just didn't happen, unfortunately.
No, I did not. And like, no, yeah, that actually, I'm glad you pointed out too, because the story behind that movie is really fascinating. I also think it's something can be said for, you know, look, corporate mentality be damned, right? We just kind of went through this year-long saga of AT&T buying Time Warner, then AT&T sharing ownership of Time Warner with or Warner Media with Discovery Channel, all for this, and like, you know, and how they're lining up the HBO Max application, and like how they're trying to expand out and all this other stuff, and on top of that, the DC Comics connection and how that whole thing played out, right? And you know, something can be said for the mentality of Warner Brothers back in 2015, right? Because they really were dedicated to auteurs.
Yeah.
Like, and that's something that really did define them. And I don't think we appreciated that nearly enough at the time, but I think that's something that really defined them during the era of, you know, Disney's aggressive expansion with the MCU and Star Wars, and then the overreaction from other studios to that, right? Which is like, you know, let's make a monster verse, and let's make a this verse, and like let's make it, you know. But meanwhile, you know, Warner Brothers, mind you, of course, they were making DC movies at this time, but they weren't trying to overdo everything, and they really were just kind of entrusting these filmmakers to make films, you know.
Yeah. Well, last decade was so frustrating, but so interesting.
Yeah.
At the same time, like on one hand, and trust me, I love Marvel movies. You know, I love Marvel movies.
Yeah.
You literally sold me comics 20 years ago. But and the MCU expansion was great, but it's like they broke Hollywood in a sense, where you had some good movies that slipped through. Fortunately, this wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
You had things like John Wick and The Raid that just showed up and just
Yeah.
taught everybody how to read again, or however you want to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had a bunch of garbage that was just being thrown at the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the MCU, which just dominated
Yeah.
so much.
Right.
And it's going to be interesting. I mean, we can already do it. You know, we're in a new decade, and you can co-sign this. I've been saying this for a while. We're about to see tech swallow up, big tech swallow up everything.
I mean, yeah. I mean,
Like,
I wouldn't be surprised by it.
yeah. But I think next last decade is going to be, there's going to be a lot to look at, and it's going to be really interesting looking back and seeing sort of like the death of auteurs and who makes it out of there.
Yeah.
Because it's not just George Miller. They let George Miller have the reins here, and it was a big gamble. But Zack Snyder too, and
Zack Snyder, Christopher Nolan, like
exactly.
Yeah.
These are director-led franchises and initiatives. They weren't producer-led, which is what we saw with Star Wars and Marvel. And I think it's safe to say, like Star Wars, they're making money, but they're also getting a lot of people angry for reasons. We don't need to go into all the details. But Marvel, we're also in this phase where they need to decide where to go, and what vision is going to take over next. What's the next phase going to be? And there's some questions there. But I mean, in one sense, maybe the produce, and maybe this is how the market. And sorry, I'm just droning on, just to people to tell me to shut up.
No,
But in one sense, we've seen the producer-led model maybe a bit more sustainable. But with the director-led model, you have movies like Fury Road, which are nearly perfect and so influential. And you can just sit down and rewatch it over and over again and not get tired.
Well, no, actually, you just made me realize something. Like, we're basically seeing two competing ideologies about, obviously two competing ideologies about how to make movies, right? That has actually been done before, right? There's the big studio model. There's a big studio model that was like basically from the golden age up until the 60s when things started to fall apart for Hollywood, right? And then like we get into the French New Wave, which gives birth to guys like Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Francois Truffaut, and like et cetera, et cetera. And so that is the auteur, the director-led visionaries, right? That come into play. And so it's interesting because what we're having is like we're reverting back to the studio-led mentality. And it's not to say that there haven't been studio-led films. There always have been studio-led films.
Yeah.
But one thing was more at the forefront than the other for like several decades. You know what I mean? And so like, I think that's really interesting that now we're at this point here where, the auteur is going to have to find a home, potentially have to find a home. And the studio-led thing is like, pretty much like if you want to get in the theaters and get a major release, you got to be in line with what the studio wants, like almost like at a high percentage, I'll say.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, that's all I can say. I mean, and it's important to remember that movies developed and changed. Like we really grew up in that post 60s era, right? That lasted, oh my God, into the 2000s, let's say, where it's director, creator led, even big actor led, right? Like Stallone, Arnold. I mean, I guess you could argue in the 90s it was mostly actor led to the point where like they were getting $20 million paychecks to make movies.
Yeah, you're right. That was a piece of the puzzle I forgot to mention. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, and it's also easy to let it slip by because you just take Julia Roberts for credit. I mean, I'm sorry. You take Julia Roberts for granted right now. There you go. And she sort of like she just shows up and stuff. But there was a time when she was getting $20 million paychecks.
She was the reason you made a movie.
Yeah. And I see we got a new person watching us, and they're probably wondering why we're talking about Julia Roberts instead of Max Fury Road.
It all makes sense.
It all makes sense, but watch from the beginning when we post it. No, but yeah, so that was the actor-led era of the 90s. Now it was director-led into the 2000s. And then the 2010s, we sort of saw them duke it out. But yeah, I think it's going to be studio-led for obvious reasons. But maybe things are going to work out better. But anyway, just to get back on task here, I mean, George Miller's going to get a couple of more movies out of this, isn't he?
Well, I mean, that was actually going to be my next question to you. Like, I mean, look, Fury Road started in like the development process for this started like sometime after Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah.
And this movie was originally intended to be the fourth film in the franchise. And then as we kind of progressed into the studio era, right?
Yeah.
Then it became a talk about like, well, let's just reboot it and do an expanded universe. And so Miller was already thinking ahead, but Miller already had the script for Fury Road that he had already been developing through storyboards with Brendan McCarthy and through scripts with Nico Lathoris. And and so he's always had 3 more movies lined, had an idea of a trilogy that he wanted to do here, where it's like it starts with Fury Road, and I think the next one was going to be The Wasteland, and
it looks like it's going to be Furiosa next, because just looking at IMDb, so Furiosa, which is probably going to be great, and then it's Mad Max: The Wasteland,
right?
So,
and I mean, I think it's going to really boil down to, who knows what Discovery and AT&T have in store for these type of movies now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, it could be one of those things like, well, we sold a lot of Furiosa Funko Pops, so yeah, go make the Furiosa movie. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, I mean, that merger. I mean, that merger is so tricky. That merger is really weird. It's not a sell-off.
Nope.
I don't think they could. It's so weird. Like, you have AT&T bought Warner Brothers, right? Now they're spinning off Warner Media to merge with Discovery. And I mean, that could go so many different ways. Like, Disney could try and swallow them up. Freaking Apple could try and swallow that up and just add it to their thing. But who knows what they're going to do content wise then?
Yeah.
Like, you get a new bunch of people in there who, I don't know. I'm sure they're not going to cancel it or anything like that. But we're in this strange new era, man. And let me put it this way. Do you think Netflix could have made Mad Max Fury Road, or would they have?
I think they would have, and I think they could have, and especially since I know that they're kind of partial to projects that are already developed and not things that they have to do from the ground up. But I don't think it would have been the same movie.
Yeah, I don't know if they could have done it. Just not that, I mean, and I love Netflix stuff. Like, we should actually do a video on Love, Death, and Robots. I'd love to talk to you about that if you've watched the whole thing. But,
actually, I would definitely say like stuff like Black Mirror and Love, Death, and Robots is actually kind of in line with Mad Max Fury Road.
But in terms of, I mean, this is going to be a bit granular, but would they send a team of people out to the desert for months on end? That's like, because that sense, this movie was hard to make. They had production problems, like not solutions, problems. And
it goes back to 1987.
I know, right?
Right. Like, I mean, like, they even, like, apparently I think the movie was supposed to come out in 2013, and then like some sort of like environmental, it's like, so wherever they wanted to shoot, which was like, this massive desert area.
I know what you're talking about. It actually rained.
Like,
they went to the desert and then it started raining. And they had to find a new desert. Yeah.
And they ended up in was it Namibia in Africa, basically.
I just don't know. See, I guess that's going to be my big question for the streaming era, because like Netflix is going to keep dominating, Amazon Prime's going to start swinging, and then you have Disney Plus and the HBO Max, Time Warner, or God, I can't even call it Time Warner anymore, can I? Discovery Warner Media thing that they just made. I just don't know if those types of companies are going to want to send people to the middle of the desert to make movies.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it could just be me splitting hairs here,
Well, I'm looking at the budget for this film, and I mean, keep in mind this movie was in development from 1987 till to 2015,
Jeez.
which is insane. This they say the budget is somewhere between $154 million to $185 million, and And there's probably, and that's, of course, we always point this out. That's not including just promoting it, which may have factored into the how soft the promotion was for this film. Like, you know what I mean? But also, I'm sure there's just stuff in here in general that's not even accounted for. This might just be the budget for the movie once it finally went into production, like once they started actually shooting, like, you know what I mean? And like once they went to actual pre-production instead of the developmental pre-production hell they were in for like 20 years, so who knows how much this movie actually costs in the long run.
Yeah. Well, I like to, I don't know, just for the sake of simplicity, you got to start with when they started making the movie, in my opinion, because it's like Unforgiven. That was the Clint Eastwood film from the early 90s, let's just say. But apparently that script for Unforgiven was just sitting around for decades and nobody wanted to make it for some reason. And he got a hold of it and turned it into,
a classic.
Oh my God. Yeah. That movie's so good.
Like the Western that people who love Westerns like.
Yeah.
That's after the era of Westerns, so
absolutely. Well, let's wrap it up. We've been talking for an hour, man, and there's a whole 10 minutes that we got to edit together soon. How do you want to wrap it up?
I'm looking at my notes. I'm trying to think if there's something I didn't really get a chance to mention. We talked about I mentioned kind of offhandedly, like I know what I want to mention. There you go. So I consider this movie to be both operatic and metal as fuck.
Nice.
And I was wondering about this, like as we were getting ready for this, like we call Star Wars a space opera, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what could we call this? Because I feel like there needs to be something akin to that for this type of movie.
Well, I actually thought about this while we were talking, but I didn't get a chance to mention it. Mm-hmm. And these movies are not science fiction.
No, they aren't. I mean,
they're a subgenre.
Yeah, speculative.
Yeah. It's like so I guess that's the only thing with the Rick and Morty thing that they turned it into a sci-fi thing, but they're not sci-fi at all. Like it's actually de-sci-fi. If you think about it, they're about devolution, not like evolution.
Yeah.
But I agree. This is the most heavy metal movie ever. Like,
well, I mean, that's it.
To the point where there's a guitarist with the flaming guitar,
right,
running around.
Just to make it very clear, like where this is coming from. I mean, like, to me, like, I think in the last 3 or 4 years, I've really gotten into 2000 AD and Heavy Metal Magazine.
Oh yeah. Let's go.
Yeah, right. And I feel like outside of like the very obvious direct adaptations of heavy metal stories and 2000 AD stories, this movie, like, it's right. Like, if we did a screening, right, it would be Heavy Metal the movie, Judge Dredd 3D, and Mad Max Fury Road. Like, that would be the trifecta, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think that, like, this is and maybe there's something in the middle there that I'm not really thinking about too clearly, but like, I feel like this movie is like, and I mean, this is also just kind of like a fact. Like, they made this movie using the storyboards of artist Brendan McCarthy. Like, before there was they weren't really doing a script.
Yeah.
They were making storyboards for this movie because they knew how visual this movie needed to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like this film belongs to comic books as much as it does cinema, which is interesting. And I know it was like a few months ago, or actually probably about a year ago now, over a year ago, Martin Scorsese made that comment about how Marvel movies are roller coaster rides or amusement park rides, but they're not cinema.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's the thing: like, I got into it with a few of my friends about this, a few of my other friends about this. Like, I know what he means when he says that. Like, you know what I mean? I know exactly what he means when he says it, but it's kind of hard to explain to people who, and like, I do production work, but like, I'm not at this level of production work. Like, you know what I mean? But like, it's kind of hard for people to explain to people who are just fans. Like, you know what I mean? Who are just experiencing this as just moviegoers. But I understand exactly what he means. Like, there's an extra thing that Mad Max Fury Road has, and movies like it that Martin Scorsese movies have, that that the Marvel movies don't. Like, you know what I mean? That's not a knock on the Marvel movies. I feel, but I might say all this to say the Marvel movies are not trying to be, as far as I'm concerned, movies necessarily. They're trying to be comic books turned live action. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, hey,
And I
go
think
ahead.
that Mad Max, in a weird way, is like an extension of that, but it kind of finds a way to become cinematic at the same time.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with what you're saying, right? And I think you actually get that when you watch the unedited Justice League cut or whatever,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
call it the director's cut, the Snyder cut
Hmm.
of Justice League
Hmm.
versus Avengers, right?
Hmm.
And they're two different movies, but I hate to say this
Hmm.
because I love my Marvel movies, but that movie, the Snyder cut, felt more cinematic
Oh yeah, no, I definitely did.
than
Warts,
the average
warts and
Marvel
all.
film.
Like
Yeah, yeah,
despite its
yeah,
flaws, like you know, and I had a lot of issues with that Snyder cut, but like it's a more cinematic movie, and
yeah,
the Marvel movies are more like, and I say the Fast and the Furious movies are in the same category with the Marvel movies. You know, they're events and they're thrill rides and they're fun and they're exciting and they're entertaining. You know, they are entertainment. You know what I mean? But there's something different that like guys like George Miller and Steven Spielberg and like we even see
yeah,
with the new Star Wars movies, like you know the difference between when George Lucas does something versus when some of these newer guys do something. They're coming from a fan perspective, like you know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah.
Um, you know, so I think I just find that interesting is all.
No, totally, totally. And Marvel movies are bound to certain rules that like
Yes.
Christopher Nolan criticized.
Hmm.
Like films aren't supposed to have end cuts at the end. And I was sort of like, you know what, butts off. You know,
You're
that's
right,
that's
right, right. Yeah. Like
but
whatever.
but I mean,
It's not like
I'll
they
end it on
invented
this.
these.
Like I feel like Civil War
Hmm.
was probably the most cinematic Marvel film.
I can see that.
Would you agree with me there?
I can see that. I can definitely see that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see what you mean by that.
Yeah, like what they were doing, it was familiar, but it was big, but it was um like the whole thing between Captain America and Iron Man in that movie
Yeah.
was it was sort of like when not the same. Well yeah, when he found out his parents were killed, it's like when
Hmm.
Immortan Joe loses his little baby.
Hmm.
All of
Hmm.
a sudden it got personal, and
Hmm.
that felt and maybe that feels more cinematic in some ways. Also the way it was shot.
Actually, you know
I mean,
what? I actually, you know, and
whatnot.
I totally understand what you mean by Civil War. I actually would say that the first Iron Man is more cinematic than like a lot of the other Iron Man movies. That has a lot to do with John Favreau.
Well, yeah.
Like,
It's hard to argue that movie's literally the prototype for
yeah,
that $22 billion franchise
you're
and,
right.
and
Yeah,
counting. I mean,
yeah,
you
yeah.
can't understate how sorry, I almost knocked over something. Um, you can't overstate how much that movie got right.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's all I can say. Also, Thor at times, a very
Yeah.
beautiful
I mean,
movie.
it is
No,
Kenneth Branagh. It is Kenneth Branagh that made that happen. But yeah, I would probably say the Iron Man films seem a little bit more in line with the film student mentality. I think that kind of goes into John Favreau has. But no, going back to my thing about the operatic, you know, like space opera
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm going to say I'm trying to work apocalypse into this somehow. So I was thinking it was like maybe like apoperatic. I'm trying to find. I'm like, what is the equivalent to space opera that we could kind of make this? Because I feel like this has to be this in itself is kind of like its own genre.
Well,
Like you know what I mean,
I want to
or
say, like
some
I mentioned,
genre.
yeah. Well, I mentioned Walking Dead before,
Yeah.
and sort of, I think that sort of falls into this too. I mean, if you take out the disease that makes you a zombie, I guess that's science fiction, even though it could be a weaponized version of rabies
Hmm.
and probably more realistic than ever at this point, given the
Hmm.
era we live in.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just this genre that explores everything falling apart.
Hmm.
And
Well, I don't. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think he still does it the best after all these years,
Mhm.
even though it's a bit ridiculous at times. Like, like I don't know, I keep oscillating between like Thunderdome being corny and Thunderdome being like really deep,
Mhm.
which I mean, two things can exist at the same time. That's
Oh yeah,
totally
for sure.
fine. But
Yeah, yeah.
but just the way he somehow and I'll leave it at this, and I'll let you finish up. But somehow he makes it feel real, even though he's making something new.
Yeah.
And it's just magic. Like it's real magic when he
Yeah.
does it. George
Yeah.
Miller directing these films, to be clear.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think no, and I totally feel you. Actually, and I also forgot one thing that we didn't even mention. Like these Mad Max movies in general, kind of created and I'm not saying 100% created, right? Because they were definitely informed by other things prior to it, but kind of like solidified what a post-apocalyptic sci-fi film is supposed to be. Like or post-apocalyptic sci-fi story is supposed to be. It's probably the most imitated interpretation of post-apocalyptic, and of course, was it Richard Matheson's I Am Legend existed before that,
I was
and
just about to
Dune
mention
existed
Omega
before
Man.
that,
Yeah.
or I guess maybe I'm not sure if Dune existed before the first Mad Max, but
Dune
but
the
yeah,
book. Yeah,
the
I'm
book,
pretty sure the books.
okay,
Yeah.
um,
But yeah, but it's important. I was just gonna say, like, it feels like Mad Max invented this genre, but it didn't. It
right,
just did it so well.
yeah,
It just stands out, and
yeah,
it feels like it created. God, I gotta watch Omega Man again. God, what a freaking fun ride that movie was.
all right.
I gotta look back at Charlton Heston.
Actually,
Planet of the
no,
Apes. Oh,
as I
Planet of the
said,
Apes.
yeah, I literally
Oh
was
my
about to say,
God.
you said Omega Man. It's funny, we both had the same thought at the same time. You said Omega Man, and I was like, Charlton Heston. Oh wait, Planet of the Apes was in the '60s. Like, yeah, okay, But I
Dude, we
definitely
could.
feel,
Oh my God.
like it did give, but it did give post-apocalyptic. That's why I was very hesitant to say this because I knew I was forgetting something. But like, it definitely, Mad Max definitely gives the post-apocalyptic genre form and shape. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And
Yeah,
it does it so well, the whole bit. The
yeah.
whole bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Anyway, let's leave it there. We've been doing this for an hour and 11 minutes, which is great. I'm gonna create a supercut of this with hopefully a legal version of this conversation. We can post on YouTube, and I'll send that to you. But I'm sure you can tell, dude, this is a great time. Really glad we got to do this, man.
Yeah.
And really looking forward to the next one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we got to decide what we're going to do next. What should we talk about next, guys? Like, let us know in the comments.
Yes, please sound off in the comments. We will take requests. I really want to talk about Planet of the Apes. I haven't watched that movie in so long. That'd be great. But anyway, let's do our shout outs, and we'll plan for World Takeover over lunch. What do you want to let people know about?
Yeah, so I guess look, I'm Troy Jeffrey Allen. Once upon a time I was the managing editor for Action to Go Go. It's all Derek's show now. But I've always been proud of Action to Go Go. Like, I always thought that it was like, it kind of it helped define my taste. It made me recognize what my tastes were. You know what I mean? And that extends to Previewsworld, which I am a producer and host of on YouTube. Also the behind the scenes, I'm also the content marketing manager. So a lot of the stuff you see on Previewsworld is kind of has to pass my desk if I have not written it or hosted it, so definitely check that out on YouTube. We do weekly shows and we let people know about the world of comics, which is one of the reasons I talked about comics so much. And look, I did an MF Doom comic, and that's pretty much everywhere on my profile across various social media. So just follow me on TJA Comics, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So there you go.
Excellent. And I can vouch for Troy. Not only have I worked with him, but I've also been one of his customers. I read his comic book Bam, Fight of the Century, and the MF Doom tribute, which was wonderful tribute to that legend. Anyway, this is Derek Scarzella, editor-in-chief of Action A Go-Go. You can follow us on Twitter at Action A Go-Go and Instagram. Please reach out. Feel free to give us some ideas here, like Troy mentioned. Also, you can read my books. I have 2 novels available on Amazon. The first is The Vicious Game. The second is Knuckle Crack Bone. More than happy to answer any questions about those as well. And above all, thank you so much for joining us. Had a super great time talking about Mad Max Fury Road and everything else even remotely related to it. Can't wait to do this again. Have a good rest of the week, everybody. Bye.